And it is 12:05, so we can go ahead and get started. Are you two ready to go ahead and get started?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to do our usual format, which is names, pronouns, and the icebreaker. As always, I will go first. And the icebreaker for today will be, since we're ending the season of giving, what is your favorite gift you've ever received? So, my name is Jonathan. My pronouns are he, him. And my favorite gift I received is going to be a gift that I've given to myself. About 2 years ago, I went out, finally bought the bullet, and bought one of those robot vacuums, and I haven't looked back since. I know the gift sounds so boring, but it really is perfect for me as someone who hates vacuuming, I hate sweeping, I hate mopping, and it's great to have an automated machine that does it for me every day. So, what about you two?
I can relate to that heavy, Jonathan. I got one last year, and it's been a game changer and a life changer. So yeah, that's a great one. Um, I'm Cam, he, him pronouns. The best gift I've received was probably when I got a bike when I was a kid. Um, really excited about it. Took me forever to learn how to ride it, and I had training wheels for years. But yeah, really enjoyed it.
Okay, I don't really have anything, but I think um, when I first got my paycheck, the first little treat or gift that I gave myself was like um, a niacinamide serum. And it was like really the first treat that I ever uh, gave myself. Yeah.
I love that. I would say even a paycheck itself is a gift, so good for you.
Oh, yeah, I
Okay,
also forgot.
go ahead.
I'm Arian, any pronouns. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, and I will ask the question, what did you both think of Angels Before Men by Rafael Nicolas? Any general thoughts to share?
I can start. I liked it overall. Um, I think I was most drawn to Lucifer's sort of evolution through the book. He ended up, I mean, obviously in a very different place. I think both like psychologically and literally physically in the end than he did from the beginning. So it was interesting to kind of follow that trajectory. Um, and it was also interesting and cool to kind of see these other sort of important, sort of well-known figures that were making appearances throughout the novel as well, and kind of seeing Raphael Nicolas's like interpretation of them. Um, so that was really cool as well. I wasn't familiar with a lot of the archangels, and so this was like a really cool learning experience for me. So yeah, I'd say overall I liked it.
I I think it was really nice. When I first read like the book blurb of there being a romance between um, Lucifer and Michael, I was like, how are they gonna do this? It's kind of left field, but it was really nice. It felt like fan fiction in the best way possible, and it was just it made me feel kind of giddy. I forgot how that felt. Uh, it felt like Wattpad at 3 a.m. at some moments, which was really, really nice. And overall, I think, well, I didn't finish the book, but I guess I could tell how it ends. But uh, yeah, like what Cam said, the trajectory of seeing Lucifer's character growth or kind of like character degrowth was kind of nice to read about as well. It's, yeah.
Welcome in, Devante. We're just sharing our general thoughts in the book. You can go ahead and go next if you have any thoughts you want to share.
Hi everyone, my name is Devante. I use he him pronouns. My thoughts of the book was I feel like when the story was moving, I really enjoyed it. I do feel like at some points it kind of dragged, but I feel like overall, I feel like the story that I was trying to tell was a very captivating one.
Nice. I guess to agree with all of you, I really, really enjoyed this book. I really enjoy the fact that it seems that the author did a lot of research into the original story. I'm not sure what the author's religious upbringing is or where they land now faith-wise, but it's clear they, if not growing up in the church, they definitely did a lot of research in the Bible. I also really enjoyed the subtle references to other books that predate this one that discuss heaven, hell, Satan. I noticed a lot of Dante's Inferno. I noticed Paradise Lost by John Milton. Um, so I love that. I also thought it was really cool the way this author chose to tie in some events that we know scientifically happened, but are not in the Bible, like dinosaurs and Pangea. And I love the fact that the author used Satan's fall to kind of to kill the dinosaurs and start Pangea, and then that leads into the next era of creation. Um, to agree with Devante, I do have some issues with the story. I think very similar to the retelling we read in, I want to say it was August or September, when we read Self-Made Boys, the Great Gatsby retelling. I think because this story is so well known, or at least well known to me, I found myself in the beginning of the story kind of bored because these are all things I already knew. I was most curious to see what the author chose to do in the story's second half as we watch Lucifer slowly kind of descend into his madness. Um, so for the whole first half, I can't lie, I was kind of bored. I can appreciate the author giving so much setup for how heaven looks and what heaven is like for an angel and all of that. But I don't know. For me, it kind of dragged a lot. Um, but the second half picked up, so that's a good thing. Okay. And I guess now I'll ask, what did you guys think of the author's ability to build this world out? How do you think heaven was depicted?
I, no, I think the attention to details was very nice. Like I can kind of picture myself like walking down the streets of heaven and like even like going into like the bathhouse and having like a good idea in terms of what that might look like for the angels. So I do feel like he did put a lot of good details into the imagery.
I agree. I think when I imagine certain scenes where important events had happened, I can imagine those settings. I think at least like in my own imagination very vividly. I think about like the central fountain, like where Lucifer first met up with Baal to learn how to fly, and the bathhouse, like you had mentioned, Devante, or Michael's house. For some reason, that also just kind of conjures up a very vivid image for me. Um, and so, yeah, I thought he did a really good job about describing those particular settings and also kind of fleshing out what heaven was to kind of look like, but also kind of feel like too.
No, I'd agree with the both of you. Um, I feel like I could just know what a day in heaven would feel like based on this book and what every angel would be doing, or uh, basically, yeah, what the settings would look like. Um, yeah, no, I thought the world building was pretty nice.
I'm a little torn. I do agree with you guys that heaven obviously sounded very beautiful. The only issue I have with it, and maybe this is why you guys were so easily able to picture what heaven looked like, I think heaven sounded a whole lot like ancient Rome, with the bathhouses, with all of the columns, the beautiful gardens, all of that. And I was a little bit, I don't want to say unsatisfied because, again, yes, it sounds beautiful. Ancient Rome, obviously in paintings looks beautiful, but it's just, I would think to live in heaven, to be angels that can create literally whatever you want, heaven sounded a little basic, a little human to me, which I thought was kind of interesting. Um, and I also noticed some people in reviews on Goodreads said they found it kind of interesting how the angels have many forms, at least two for each angel. And of course, archangels have other forms, but they all chose to walk around in humanoid form, which I didn't really pay attention to, but I guess is kind of a little bit of an issue, I guess. But it didn't really bother me too much. Did you guys notice that too? Did you guys think it was kind of interesting how the angels all were always in human form?
I remember they made reference to one like archangel that wasn't a central character, kind of being in like a ring shape or something, who had said like maybe one line toward the end. Um, and I didn't recognize until you said that, Jonathan, that that may have been like another form. I didn't realize that angels could take on multiple forms. Um, yeah.
I don't think I really minded that they were in the humanoid form, um, because I feel like it would have been hard for me to actually kind of visualize them like as the Bible depicts them, like with the wings everywhere and the multiple eyes. But I do like that the book like hinted or kind of referenced the fact that angels do have different forms, or aren't in the way that we kind of see them commercially depicted.
Yeah, I noticed. I think there were two instances where the author really honed it in. So when Lucifer first lost his voice, I think when he was recovering, Rosier mentioned that his second form was like a seraphim, I think, or something like that. So that was like really nice to know. And the way he said it so casually did imply that uh, it was normal. And then when Uriel was before God, I think. Wait, I'm trying to remember. Uh, God wanted him to be in his human form, despite Uriel preferring his previous form. So I think that might play into part why they're all uh, choosing their humanoid form instead of their other form.
Hmm. Okay, now let's quickly discuss our two main characters and then I would say a very important side character. Let's start with, oh, that's going to be Lucifer, Michael, and God. Let's start with Lucifer. General thoughts on Lucifer in this book.
Jonathan, I think you had touched on this earlier, but I enjoyed Lucifer's character. As someone who grew up religious, it's also just kind of weird for me to even like sort of think of Lucifer as being someone who I could like empathize with. So that was also kind of a weird kind of journey to have while reading this. But one of the things that I had wondered about was the evolution that he had taken over the course of the novel. I think, Jonathan, you had mentioned that it felt sort of slow in the beginning, and I agree. I think with his sort of descent into madness, the first part was really good in terms of him sort of, I guess, like exhibiting that goodness, and then it very slowly kind of started to change for him in the second part. And then it almost felt like I turned the page and he was all of a sudden like completely different. Now he was a demon. Now he was sinning. Now he was like corrupting all of heaven. And it seemed to happen really abruptly. Um, and I actually found that I enjoyed the section where all of heaven had, descended into madness, and wished that he could have spent more time on that rather than sort of the slow buildup. But as far as Lucifer's character, I did find myself really kind of enjoying his overall sort of character arc.
Yeah, I agree with what we just said. I kind of feel like it was like a weird thing. I actually kind of felt myself like, can Lucifer just have sex already? Which is a weird statement. Or can I feel like I just wanted something to actually happen in the book, in the first half. So I kind of feel like, as we're kind of seeing, the character get develop more. Um, I feel like the way they depicted him was very nice. Or well, not very nice, but they did a good job depicting like his character. But I also do agree. I do feel like the descent, like at first it seemed gradual, and then it just happened all of a sudden. When he started to hurt himself and, really start to get the other angels to also start to be disobedient.
Okay, so I'm gonna try not to say his name as much as possible, because if my parents hear me, I feel like they're gonna feel like I'm in a cult or something, or like I've turned to the dark side. But I I agree with Jonathan and Cam that the first part of the book was really slow. That's probably why I didn't finish it, because it really took me a lot to power through that and reach the second half of the book, which I started to enjoy much more thoroughly. When Lucifer started his punishment, that was like the shift where it's like, oh, okay, wow, interesting. I liked how we got to see his thought processes and the reasoning behind, his kind of indignance. And I only got up to the part where um, he started influencing the baby or the young angel. So when he cut himself open with the knife, that was kind of just like the start of, oh, okay, wow, he's really far gone. It felt very much like a horror movie, kind of something you find there. And it wasn't that bad until then. Or that, no, it was gory by then. I forgot about the beasts. Sorry. But, yeah, no, I thought that his descent was nice, well done. But after that, I can't say anything else.
Yeah, to pick you off, to pick you off with what, to pick you off of what Cam said, I really, really liked Lucifer, especially in the beginning. As someone who also grew up in a heavily religious household and in the church, I empathize with Lucifer a lot. I think a lot of the same reasons he chose to no longer follow God are a lot of the same reasons I chose the same thing. Um, but that does bring me to my one issue that I believe you all also have as well, is the author spends so much time for, I would say, 90% of the book, painting Lucifer as this sympathetic character, only for him to just flip a switch and go like full on ballistic. He's like murdering birds. He's convincing a young baby angel to steal. It's like, then there's that orgy in the church, and it's like, I don't know. I feel like at that moment we see Lucifer become what I believe a lot of religions depict him as, which is like purely evil. And I found myself wondering what was the point of crafting such a sympathetic character that I'm assuming, want your readers to empathize with, only for you to then turn him around and make him fully evil. Um, I also found that incredibly strange. And especially towards the end where he's like murdering the other angels, like cutting off their heads and wearing their skin. I was like, okay, sure. Um, but yeah. Now I'll ask, what do we think of Michael in this story?
Sorry, I just want to add on to what you were saying as well, Jonathan. It was interesting because Lucifer was the only character that I actually did feel like I empathized with. I didn't feel like I was able to empathize or really relate to anybody else in the novel. I even found like God to be sort of strangely kind of sadistic in his own way too, which again is also like weird to say out loud, but um, yeah, I don't know. It was I had complicated feelings about I think most of the characters in the novel, except for Lucifer in part one. Um, yeah, I just wanted to add that in before moving on to Michael.
I will say that in some ways, I also found Michael to be a little bit empathetic. Obviously, I empathize with Lucifer more, but I think Michael represents someone who maybe is not a true believer, because we see how when God begins to punish Lucifer, he becomes quite angry with God and then even dares to argue with him, which is what he, kind of swore he would never do, um, just to defend Lucifer. But I think Michael was incredibly scared. He was afraid to face whatever punishment God was going to give Lucifer, so he didn't want the same thing to happen to him. And I think that represents, or I would say, I think that is meant to represent how a lot of people feel about religion. And I think the author poses an interesting question towards the end of the battle, where he sees the other angels fighting for God's side. He says something along the lines of, I can see in your eyes you don't truly accept him as your savior. You're just too afraid of punishment. And I think a lot of people who are, I guess, spiritual or religious, they don't truly believe, you just are afraid of the alternative. You're afraid of the punishment. You're afraid of hell. Um, so I really liked the fact that the author was able to craft a character that we see having the same internal battle. Does anyone else have any thoughts on Michael?
Yeah, I also kind of saw Michael as being very conflicted. I think, well, I guess he wasn't really there from the beginning, when he was first born. Um, but it's hard to see someone know that they can be a loving, curious person and then kind of see the descent to madness. So, like, I can't imagine, like, what his thought was as he was seeing Lucifer, start his descent. And I think when we do see like the good in people, sometimes we do try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so I'm wondering like how much of, well, I know how you were when you were younger, and also my love for you tells me that you're a good person, and just finding it hard to believe that this is, what Lucifer was becoming. and I think it's also kind of like the same mindset that a lot of angels had. Like Daniel or um, some other ones like Gabriel, ones that he ended up killing.
Oh my gosh, damn. I need to read the second part of the book ASAP. But I only got up to the point where Michael was still vehemently denying that Lucifer was bad when Uriel confronted him about it and he just came back from Eden. So up till that point, I thought Michael was just kind of there to act as kind of like Lucifer's motivation in a sense. That he was always there for him and might have, you know, um, helped Lucifer's downfall in a way. Not that he contributed to it, but he was kind of like an anchor for Lucifer. I'm probably gonna get got after this, but he was an anchor for L, and then yeah, he was just your, I guess you could say, perfect love interest. There wasn't any flaws with him until I guess when they tried introducing his cowardice when um, it was punishment time, and I think it was Rosier that mentioned or clocked that he felt guilty or thought that it was his fault that L was punished in that way. But yeah, it was. I liked his character though because it was nice to read his interactions with L.
I also like their relationship between Lucifer and Michael. Um, I think it was interesting to see a character like Lucifer being paired up with a very sort of different type of a character that Michael was, and I enjoyed reading about that. I think I found myself feeling really frustrated with Michael, especially toward part two, when Lucifer was beginning his descent. I think um, I, I can recognize how Michael potentially may have been feeling toward Lucifer and the denial that he may have been experiencing at that time. But I still just kind of found myself frustrated with um, how long it took him to actually act and to do something about it rather than just allowing Lucifer to descend further and further and further um, into madness to the point where literally like heaven went up in flames. Um, yeah, so I think I ultimately kind of feel conflicted about him.
To quickly piggyback off of that, I do think it's funny how you were just saying, Cam, that Lucifer begins to destroy heaven and then Michael doesn't act. I thought it was so strange that during all of that destruction and murder, screaming, all of that, Michael is just asleep. Um, I thought that was just so strange, but whatever, I guess. Um, Now let's talk about God. What do we think about God?
I also feel conflicted about the character of God. I think on one hand, I can recognize that he represents goodness and holiness, but I felt that his characterization in the novel was not really that. Um, I, I don't know if it was just like the queer framing of the novel, but it almost felt to me like it was kind of like a sort of like a dominant type of relationship that he had with Lucifer and many of the other sort of angels that he interacted with. That just that felt very aggressive and intense, um, and not really sort of how I had imagined God before reading this novel. Which was interesting to read about and to kind of see how he sort of played a role in everything that was going on. If nothing else.
Okay, I haven't dabbled much in the Bible, but to me, this is very Old Testament of him, where he was just killing everyone's babies, and he was sending floods, or he was just picking on this person until they gave up or life and they had to turn to him. So in that regard, I feel like they really chose to focus on that aspect of him, the almighty, the all powerful, and really kind of ruthless and just, you know, um, kind of almost sadistic kind of power that he held. Um, there was at times where I thought, uh, yeah, okay, that's perfectly reasonable of him to do, kind of. And I think it was Jonathan that mentioned earlier that the reasoning of L was a lot of the reasons that he kind of changed his views on religion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I feel like the author just purposefully did that to drive it home. Uh, I kind of liked how they made him like a 4D being and separated him from the angels in that kind of sense. And it just kind of made him more othery than he would have been. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel like as the author was trying to make us more empathetic, for Lucifer, in order for that to happen, like you have to kind of see the issues with God and kind of recognizing, or from Lucifer's point of view, in terms of you have to worship me. It's kind of like when your parents say, "Do it because I said so," but not without like explaining or kind of justifying the reason why. So then it's kind of just like, okay, well, we're worried about the punishment or being in trouble. So this is why we're worshiping. And I kind of feel like the book like really honed in on like, is their relationship transactional, or is it kind of just like the angels are doing what they're doing to pay him back? Um, and so I think the author did a good job in terms of trying to, um, make you kind of question, God's motives, or the way that he treated the angels.
I think I feel about the way I feel about God in this story is very similar to how I feel about Lucifer in this story. I really appreciate the fact that the author chose to not depict either God or Lucifer as 100% bad or 100% good. I think both characters are fairly morally ambiguous. Um, and I love the fact that through the story, the author is able to pose the question of, what exactly do we as people define as good or as bad? Lucifer says at one point, I believe to Michael, you only think that I'm bad because God tells you that I am. But like, what is bad about wanting to explore pleasure? What is bad about wanting more? What is bad about loving yourself to the point to where you look in the mirror sometimes. Like, why is that bad? Um, so I do love that. Um, and I guess it's just so funny to me how tyrannical I think the author depicted God as. God kind of came off as like, either you do exactly what I say or you will be punished. And if you go far enough, I will cast you out of heaven to where you are no longer granted the privilege of being in my company anymore. Um, so I found God very interesting. But again, similar to my thoughts on Lucifer, I think God felt in this story the same way I felt about God growing up, very tyrannical. But that's just my perspective. Now, in the very beginning of the book, when Raphael first wakes up Lucifer, Raphael says to Lucifer that he had to feed him from the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, which is not usually what he does for angels. I'm curious, did anyone catch that? And then do you think that unusual procedure contributes in any way to Lucifer's behavior in the story?
I think it does. Like I know one of the main things that they brought up a lot was like God took his time when he was creating Lucifer. So I'm wondering if he was given the directive to go to the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Um, and I think that kind of sparked the curiosity, or kind of sparked the, I guess maybe that kind of started the disobedience or made him different from the other angels.
I think that yes, it does play a part in Lucifer's behavior, especially with the Tree of Knowledge. I remember from the fall of man, which is obviously after the fall of Lucifer, when Adam and Eve eat from the Tree of Knowledge, that's when they begin to disobey God as well. So I'm curious if that tree itself is what causes disobedience. It makes you too smart, and then it makes you want to question God, and his motives and his rules and whatnot. Um, I'm not sure if that's an intentional tie-in by the author, but it felt intentional to me. Um, so yes, I definitely do think that plays a part in Lucifer's behavior towards the end. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I think it did play a part, exactly for the reasons he said. But then he said he doesn't usually do that. So it kind of implied that other angels have done it before. So I'm not entirely sure if that was the entire reason. I remember when Lucifer went to. I remember when L went to the chapel or the cathedral, and he's just begging for mercy or begging to be rid of the beast inside him, and then um, God is like, the beast is you. And I found that really interesting, almost as if he intended for that to happen. Um, well, he did for Lucifer, and all of that to then unfold, which I don't know. Uh, yeah, I'm still organizing my thoughts around that, but I think that's part of the reason why. The other reason is that it was intentional on God's part. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Now, I know we talked about the relationship between Lucifer and Michael a fair bit, but I'm curious if anyone else has any other thoughts to share. How do we feel about the relationship between Lucifer and Michael?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I I mentioned this earlier, but their reading their relationship felt um, very nice. It felt like fan fiction or Wattpad at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And I really liked how the author depicted L's feelings. It was his feelings were always related to fire or boiling brimstone, heat, and all that jazz. And I really liked that aspect of it. Uh, yeah, I was surprised on how thoroughly I enjoyed the romance. I can't really say for how it ended because uh, I didn't get to that part, but overall, the build up of the romance and the execution of it, I enjoyed.
Yeah, go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, I was going to say I kind of feel like I appreciate the way that the relationship formed naturally, and also like that they were able to balance each other off. I think one of the moments that really stuck out to me was when Lucifer wanted to go to Earth for the first time, and he was really struggling with people staring at him because he was so beautiful. Um, and Michael was really able to kind of ground him and just be like, "Oh, well, yeah, you are so beautiful. So how about you share some of your beauty with me?" And it kind of took some of the burden off. And then they were able to train each other. I feel like the way that they worked together and balanced each other um, was very rewarding and natural. And then, as I mentioned before, when the descent started to happen, you can kind of see like the confliction and Michael wanting to, still have his love for Lucifer, while also kind of battling, with himself in terms of, his relationship with God.
I agree with both Arion and Devante. I like the relationship overall. Um, I wondered if the dynamics of the relationship between both Lucifer and Michael sort of changed over the course of the novel as sort of a reflection of how Lucifer himself was changing. Um, I wondered about sort of Lucifer appearing more insecure, having sort of a lower self-esteem in the beginning, and Michael sort of being more of his protector um, toward sort of that portion of the novel, to then kind of moving on to Lucifer feeling himself a little bit and being a little bit more proud when Michael was sort of fighting in the arena, and then coming back to Lucifer and delivering his earnings and his jewels like onto Lucifer's neck, while he was kind of feigning, um, almost sort of like this royal type of air. Um, then to like the conflict whenever Lucifer had like fully descended. Um, I found sort of that trajectory of Lucifer's characterization and how it was reflected in their relationship to be interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I really enjoyed the relationship between Lucifer and Michael. I thought it was super cute. Um, I guess my one gripe is I just wanted more. We do get a fair amount of moments between Lucifer and Michael through Lucifer's perspective, but I feel as if a lot of the a lot of the a lot of the relationship we're told about through conversation with other angels, which I didn't necessarily like. There are millions of years that their relationship spans millions of years throughout the story. Yet I feel like we don't really get enough of them together. But I guess to be fair, even the book's description, clearly states this is not about Lucifer and Michael necessarily. They're just kind of a small part of a larger story. But I definitely wanted more. Now, I'm not sure if anyone else noticed this, but I noticed that Lucifer and Michael are not the only couple, and I use that word in quotes because they always call each other friends, but the only couple in the Bible. I'm sorry, in this story. There's Rosie and Asmodeus. There's Gabriel and Raphael. They're all couples as well. I'm curious, what do you think separates the romance that Lucifer and Michael share from the romance of the other angels? And why is Lucifer and Michael's relationship so bad if the others are not?
Yeah, I think I actually kind of overlooked the one with Gabriel and Raphael. But I do remember with As yeah, Ozymandias and Rosier, and Lucifer finding them in bed together. Um, so it is kind of like, well, why can you do it, but when I do it, it's a problem. But I think those angels are still able to, I guess, continue to function or to do what God wants them to do. Whereas Michael and Lucifer, their behaviors are changing and they are now starting to become more lazy or not as effective or doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. And I think there's even a point I was kind of wondering, like we could tell that they're together, but I feel like the book didn't mention like they were, or it didn't explicitly say that they were like romantic or sexual together. Um, so I don't know. That's my thought on that.
I wondered if maybe their relationship was different, in part because when Lucifer first came into being, he had eyes on him and he had all of this attention, in a way that kind of felt unique to him, and him sort of being sort of viewed as like this perfect angel, both like physically and just in terms of his being. Um, and that attention also being sort of shared with Michael, who's known as like the strongest archangel in heaven, and if just almost kind of like Jay-Z and Beyonce of heaven, of if just kind of their collective um, celebrity, and them sort of being a talk of the town, um, may have played a factor in that. Because yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan. We did sort of hear a lot about the relationship from the perspective of others who were involved. Um, but I don't know that I necessarily um, was able to pick up on how explicit that may have been from the other couples that were mentioned. Um, so that's kind of what I was thinking.
So, so their relationship was viewed pretty fine up until the point that Al started acting well the way that he did. So I think it was fine until it was wrong, and it was wrong because of L. And also the focus whenever L was around Michael, it was focus was always very carnal, very sensual. And I think that might have been another reason because like Cam and Devontae said, the dynamics might have been a bit different towards or compared to Michael's and Elle's relationship. So it might have been that, as well as the fact that Elle was being um, unnerving toward or proud in the sense that it unnerved the other angels. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it was Devante who pointed out that the difference between Lucifer and Michael's relationship and the other angels is that the other angels, while they were in love with each other, they still always prioritized God first. Whereas I think with Lucifer and Michael, especially in Lucifer's case, he began to love Michael so much he viewed Michael as his God. And then in some ways, whether or not Michael wants to agree with it, I think Michael viewed Lucifer in the same way. Um, and I think that's what upset God. Um, and I think before I started the story, I was a bit nervous. I was wondering, is the author going to try and paint Lucifer and Michael's sin as homosexuality? But I'm glad the author did not do that. I think their sin is loving each other to a fault. They lose sight of their duties. Um, and I guess one of my primary, I guess, struggles or conundrums throughout the whole story is with Lucifer's growing confidence. I'm curious, maybe someone has a good answer to this question. Where do you think confidence ends and pride begins? And is pride always bad?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky question. I think it depends. I think for me, the difference between confidence and pride is, I don't know, and looking at myself. So I think I mentioned before, I work as a therapist, and like I feel like I can have a lot of confidence in the work I can do with my clients, and know that I'm going to put in the best effort and the best work I can. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear my baby nephew in the background. But like I feel like having confidence and always putting my best effort in terms of helping the clients. I feel like that's confidence, but then I feel like pride comes in when I tell myself I'm the best therapist ever, and I don't need to hone my skills or do trainings or actually hear what the client is saying because I know what's best. So I feel like when it starts to kind of cloud your judgment or maybe change like the amount of effort that you're putting in, I think that's kind of for me when it kind of goes from confidence to being prideful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also a difficult distinction to make. Um, what Devante was saying kind of made me wonder about how, in my mind, I kind of viewed Michael as being one who embodied more of the confident aspect of that spectrum, and I wondered if that was perhaps because Michael might be someone who has his gifts and uses them for the benefit of others, for the protection of others, and for the protection of himself in terms of his strength and his fighting abilities. Whereas with Lucifer, he initially started off that way by allowing his I guess like appearance to garner attention, to be directed more toward God, to sort of aid in his worship of his father. Um, that then kind of warped when he was then kind of using that attention for the benefit of himself, rather than for the benefit of others. And I wondered if once it became for himself, if that more embodied sort of the idea of pride.
Um, so yeah, it is hard to kind of draw a distinction between the two, but the way I see it as is that I think confidence only involves yourself. So, like, other people's views and opinions don't matter. Um, the sense or the emotion is really just rooted in you. But pride involves others. So, we're like with pride, the confidence is bigger. And it's because of that. It's bigger because it's placed or compared against others. So, like, L was all like, oh, um, I'm so. Mhm. Okay. Um, so Al was all like, I'm so beautiful. All the other angels can't compare. Um, you know, I feel like that is like when his confidence started to. Well, he was never really confident, but when his semblance of confidence started to turn into pride, um, I think pride can be good. I don't think it could always be bad. I I think as long as you have pride and it's not necessarily used to demean others, it could be fine. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still torn myself, but I do love the point that Cam brought up is throughout the entire story, several people, and Lucifer, of course, describe Michael as being pride. Lucifer even goes as far as to call Michael the angel of pride. Um, so I guess pride must be good sometimes because it doesn't seem as if God ever had an issue with that, with Lucifer, sorry, with Michael's pride, but was had an issue with Lucifer's pride. I'm not sure if I would even consider Lucifer's issue being pride. I would more so say narcissism. Um, I think narcissism for me is where a lot of the I'm better than other people sort of mindset comes into place, which we see Lucifer embody as he begins to look down upon other angels as he finds himself more beautiful than them. He even begins to like look at Rosie A, who is someone who essentially raised him and like took him in when he first woke up. He views him as lesser than because God won't even speak to him or won't even meet him. So I would say Lucifer is more of a narcissist than someone who's prideful because I'm just not fully convinced that pride is always bad, especially considering how often we say to other people, I'm proud of you. Okay, if pride is bad, then is it bad to tell someone you're proud of them? I don't know. I guess that's more of a long discussion question that probably takes a lot of thinking, but as of right now, I'm just not really, I'm not convinced that pride is always bad. Um, Now, I found myself very confused when we got the backstory of Uriel and his husband before they became like humanoid angels. I really couldn't make sense of that or what was going on. Did anyone else find themselves clear on what was happening in that part of the story?
Yeah, I also struggle to understand it, so I won't be as much help.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of feel like maybe that was a part of the book that was just like, I don't really like Uriel. So I probably zoned out this part of the chapter that was talking about him. I didn't even know he was married. I do just know that he was like the oldest angel or one of the first ones created.
I agree. I also found them boring.
Drag him.
I didn't find Uriel boring. I thought he was a big hater. That's just me. Yeah. Yeah, I really couldn't make sense of it, but it did seem as if all of the previous angels, which I guess was God's first attempt at making angels, they are the stars and planets and whatnot that we see. But outside of that, I really couldn't make sense of why Uriel was chosen over anyone else. But sure. Also, I really wasn't sure what Uriel's role was. It seemed as if he was kind of God's like right-hand man, but at the same time, no one really seems to like or respect Uriel, which I thought was kind of interesting. But okay.
Yeah, sorry to interject. Now that you kind of mention that, he kind of sounds like I guess like the Uncle Tom, just like the house slave, in terms of always trying to hold the angels in line in terms of what they're doing and what they're not doing. Like it seems like he's really just seeking validation or wanting to be God's favorite, while also not always being chosen by him. Like even though he kind of puts himself in this position, I think technically Michael is so held in higher regard. And then Lucifer is obviously still God's favorite. So it's like even though he is always, trying to be the angel in charge, he still has never worked his way up to being God's favorite.
Yeah, I'm not Uriel being Uncle Tom and God being a slave master, but okay. um, it's said several times throughout the story, and of course, God says to Lucifer himself that he is the beginning and the end, so he knows everything that is bound to happen before it even happens, right? So, knowing that, do you think that God created Lucifer solely for the purpose of rebelling against him, or was that Lucifer's own doing, that rebellion?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I find it hard not to believe that God wasn't aware that that was at least like a very real possibility and scenario that could happen. And I think they mentioned that even in the book, where they had mentioned that God is quote unquote all knowing, that he should have been aware that something like this would have happened. And even sort of thinking back to an earlier question that you had posed, Jonathan, about um, sort of Raphael giving him the fruit from the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. It's hard to imagine that these pieces weren't sort of deliberately kind of put in place.
I think I am convinced that God did create Lucifer with the intention of him rebelling. I'm thinking back to the moment where Lucifer visits God in the cathedral, and like prays for the monster to be taken out of him or for his nightmares to be cured, and God says to Lucifer, like, "You are the monster. It is inside of you, and there's nothing that even I can do to expel it from you." Um, so I think yes, I do think it was on purpose. I think back to the early parts of the story, Lucifer feels this continuous pull to Earth, even though he's never been. And I think that is indicative of like him knowing that is his true destiny. And then even in that part of the story, other angels say to him, uh, when your destiny is presented to you, you will feel it, right? And I think it's just interesting how he constantly felt that pull to Earth. And that is, of course, where he ends up when he's cast out of heaven. Um, and then I found myself constantly questioning, why exactly is Lucifer God's favorite? I think he's his favorite because Lucifer has a very, very important role to play in all of this. he has a way more important role than anyone, Michael, Uriel, whatever. Lucifer is the only one that was able to bring forth this destruction, which kind of God needs. I think just even in real world, we need balance. We need a good and a bad. And prior to Lucifer, there was never a bad. There was only good. So I think God does need that opposite as well. And then I even think to the conversation that God had with Uriel after we read about Uriel's husband and all of that. God says to Uriel that unlike you, all of the other angels have only ever known heaven. They've only ever known peace and paradise, right? So they take it for granted. And they think that planting fruit or that singing songs is really doing something when it's not, right? They need to be taught that things can get worse. So I think that Lucifer was born to show the angels just how bad things can be if you lose sight of him, which is obviously God. Um, so I think, yes, it was all very, very intentional and well orchestrated by God. What do you two think, Devontae, Arian? Any thoughts on that?
You know, I mentioned it earlier in the cathedral about how if God is so all knowing and all powerful, then he would have seen this coming. But I think you worded it in a way that just makes sense. So yeah, um, I couldn't do it any better, I think.
Yeah, I do believe that he would know um, what would end up happening with Lucifer. I think then what makes me wonder is, at the end when all of the angels are punished, even the ones that stay, if this was his true intention to punish them. Well, I guess why did he go about it that way?
I'm curious if you guys noticed any similarities between God's behavior as king and Lucifer's behavior as quote unquote king as he tries to take over the throne from God. Did you notice any similarities between their behaviors at all?
Yeah, I feel like they both had the idea of creation and showing the angels something that they haven't experienced. I think the difference was that Lucifer showed them destruction and death and pain and agony, whereas God may have been showing them love and kindness, and helping each other.
Also seemed to be like a very strong us versus them mentality. If you're not with me, you're against me. Rather than a like power to the people, like empowerment for yourself. Yeah, I mean, from either angle, from either Lucifer or God, um, giving the power over to the people to decide their fate and their destinies for themselves, was something that was absent.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think that both God and Lucifer's behavior as rulers, they're both tyrannical and they're both dictators. Because on both sides, we see that it's either you do exactly what I say or you will be punished, right? Um, which I found so funny about Lucifer because that's exactly why he turned against God. But even when he had the chance to play God himself, he did the exact same thing. I thought that hypocrisy was so interesting. Especially because it doesn't seem like Lucifer was able to see that he was doing the exact same thing and see that that is exactly why the other angels didn't want to follow him because you're acting just like God. But I don't know. Uh, I guess randomly this came on my mind. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but do you guys think that Lucifer invented sex? because it doesn't seem as if there's any knowledge of sex or anything of that nature before the orgy scene.
It is interesting how that's like how that is left out. How anytime like the word like sin or um sort of the other more colorful language comes up, it will explicitly say that like Lucifer had sort of willed that into existence, but sex wasn't a part of that. I kind of feel like, yeah. I mean, I guess through his demonstration, it seemed like the other angels were unaware of um, those activities and quickly became familiar. And yeah, I, 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 I don't know. I find it hard to argue with Lucifer inventing sex in this book.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he did, because again, the scene when Rosier and Ozymandias were um, in the bed together, it wasn't like the book didn't explicitly say that they had sex. Um, I do feel like the angels had an idea in terms of, well, they obviously know what beauty is, but I feel like even the idea of lust may not have really been um, been a thing until Lucifer was created. Um, yeah, so I do believe like he in this book created sets.
I agree. It really did come across as that way, especially since they kind of painted him as like um, the progenitor of like sin or something like that. Uh, yeah, kudos to him.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure, but I guess if we're to take this story, in terms of this story at least, I do believe that Lucifer did invent it. But I guess on one hand, Lucifer calls it fucking. He doesn't call it anything else. So maybe Lucifer invented the lust that comes with like some kind of sex, but he didn't invent like love making or any of that, right? Because there's no love in what he's doing. Um, so yeah. And I guess while we're here talking about the orgy scene and about sex, were you able to understand exactly why Asmodeus attacked Rosier and tried to rape him? Was that clear? That left me very, very confused.
The only thing I could think of is that when he kind of sees what pleasure is and knows, this is something that he wants to experience. I feel like he kind of saw like, okay, well, I don't want to do it with these random angels. I want to do it with someone that I actually have a relationship with and actually means something to me. So I'm wondering if that kind of like prompted him to essentially try to rape Rosier.
I agree. I also kind of in my mind saw it as sort of an extension of corruption that was then kind of being extended into Asmodeus, and that in him it manifested in um, sort of sex or sexual appetite being reframed in a way where it was more aggressive in a non-consensual way, and sort of another sort of way that sin could present itself.
Okay, I did not get to this part, so I have nothing to say on that.
Yeah, that whole portion left me a bit confused. I do agree with what both Cam and Devontae said, that, possibly saving that pleasure and that corruption made him want to do it with Rosier as well. But I think what confused me is, even from Rosier's own perspective, he says that Asmodeus moves like a man who's possessed by something. So I guess I was curious, did Lucifer potentially possess Asmodeus by having him watch the orgy, or what exactly was going on there? That just wasn't very clear to me. But I think throughout the entire story, just what I know about Asmodeus, I know that he's a sexual demon in hell. So I'm curious. I found myself very curious whether or not the author was going to do that. But I think what annoyed me is Asmodeus is depicted as so loving and sweet throughout the entire story, and then he does that. Uh, I don't know. I just found it to be so such an odd turn, but I guess even in the rest of the story, that's when Lucifer begins to turn evil as well. So whatever. Um, Now let's talk about the book's ending, the final battle, all of that. What did you guys think of that? Of the book's end?
Yeah, one thing I kind of found weird about it was, as Lucifer is, he's rounding up the angels, trying to get them inspiration, and like, yes, say, stand with me, we're gonna do it, and then all of a sudden it's kind of just like, well, this is God, we're gonna lose, and it started to cause a doubt in some of the angels. Um, I thought that was kind of weird. But in terms of the final battle, and having Michael be the one to like clip his wings and play such a part, and being cast out of heaven, um, I thought it was beautifully written.
For me, the first thought that I have is I wish it was longer. To me, it felt very quick. It felt like it really just kind of came and went. Um, and it seemed like to me it focused a lot on sort of Lucifer and Michael, with God also kind of playing sort of a side role in that final battle as well. Um, I for me it's hard not to think about how the novel was kind of leading up to this very grand um, episode, and I guess was like hoping for a little bit more. Um, and then also I also kind of found like God's behavior throughout the sort of the whole final scene to be kind of interesting as well. Again, it seemed like a lot of this was sort of going on, without God interfering much at all, until the point of no return, when there's actual corrupted demons who are wanting to overthrow him, and then he makes it rain blood, and then it's just in the signal, which again just kind of felt very sort of like mildly um, signaling that he's not okay with it. But then during the whole battle, I mean, he's just kind of sitting without moving on his throne, watching the whole thing take place as Lucifer is wanting to like specifically target him, and even gets almost like close to his face, and still he's not moving a muscle, which again kind of makes me wonder, sort of harkening back to what Jonathan had mentioned earlier about this potentially being a part of God's whole plan, and um, uh, his whole design, that he knew that this was something that was going to happen, and possibly even knew that Michael was going to be the one to defeat him.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think the final battle, the destruction of heaven, all of that, that did feel a bit rushed to me. And I found myself questioning, since Lucifer at least was under the impression that God has left Eden for some time, which is why he felt so comfortable starting the destruction when he did. I found myself wondering exactly where God was, or maybe God actually was in Eden, but he was letting Lucifer do what he was doing, like Cam said, because it's all part of his plan. He needs him to do all of this, so he's not going to interfere. Um, but I guess then I found myself curious, why stop it when he did? you know? And I guess if God is aware of what Lucifer is doing, isn't it cruel to allow Lucifer to torture your archangels? Like he cuts off one of their heads, he cuts off Raphael's face, he beats the crap out of Gabriel. Uh, I'm not sure if Lucifer was telling the truth or not when he said that he was raping Michael, but if he was being honest, then he also did that. Um, that to me seems very cruel. But sure. Um, I found the ending, the final battle between Lucifer and Michael, so heartbreaking. Just this constant battle on both of their sides of, you know, how how much of love are you willing to sacrifice for fighting for what you believe is right? I think both Lucifer and Michael are struggling with that. Um, and both of them want to convince the other to be on their side, but they just see things differently. Um, and I guess I'm curious. I know I mentioned it a bit earlier, but does Michael really side with God, or is he just afraid of God? Um, wasn't really clear on that towards the end either, because he was so heartbroken having to hurt Lucifer, even though he knew that hurting him was the only way to end all of this. Um, so, so yeah. Now, considering everything that's happened, Lucifer's slow descension into madness, all of that, everything that he does in the story, are you convinced that Lucifer is truly a villain, or is he more of an anti-hero in your mind?
Yeah, I think before I answer that, I do want to say I kind of wish that they took condensed like the first 5 chapters and actually added more length to the end so that the final battle would have been longer. But to answer your question in terms of anti-hero versus villain, I kind of feel like he was a villain at the end. Like I feel like if it was just no, I want to do my own thing. I don't feel like I need to obey you because for whatever reason. Yeah, I feel like that would have been fine. But I think when it started to become torturing and killing and raping other people, that to me felt more villainous than anti-hero.
I agree. I felt like the way Lucifer went about, um, uh, I guess, like promoting his message was very villainous. But I wonder if his like message itself was more sort of anti-hero. Um, yeah.
I haven't gotten that far, but if he did what you guys said he did, then I'd consider him a villain. Yeah.
I think I'll be the odd man out here and say I think I'm more on the anti-hero side. Again, like Cam said earlier, it feels so strange to say I empathize with Satan, but at least in this story, I do. Um, Again, I think harking back to this overarching theme of Lucifer being born for all of this and all of this being God's plan. If it's all God's plan that Lucifer does these evil things, then why wouldn't God be the evil one and not Lucifer? Right? He's fulfilling his destiny. So is that evil? I'm also not sure if I think it's evil to want more for yourself. I'm not sure if I think it's evil to want free will. Those are just all things that I'm not sure are evil. Yes, I do agree with all of you that the final act, he definitely does evil things, but I'm not sure if I would call Lucifer a villain. Um, I don't know. Also, again, going back to what I said some time ago, that the world does need balance, right? It needs a good and a bad. So I don't know. I think Lucifer's kind of we need Satan as much as we need God in this story, which also sounds odd to say, but whatever. And my final question will be this book is the first in a trilogy. Each story focuses on different angels and different parts of the Bible. But I'm curious, are you guys willing to read the other three stories? I'm sorry, other two stories, or do you want to stop here?
Are they about the same length?
Um, I believe so. I know the second one is out and it's about the same page length. The third one isn't out yet, so I'm not totally sure. It might be shorter, it might be longer.
I'd be open to it. It's not something that on my own I would read like back to back to back. But it is something that I would be interested to kind of know the full story of.
Yeah, I agree. Like maybe if there was like a break in between, like maybe around like Easter time, um, then I would be open to reading it. Like, only reason I have some hesitations because I feel like this book was very dense at times. Um, Hence, like the first half feeling of the Old Testament just very long and dense. So maybe not back to back.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Devante. I didn't even get to finish the book. It felt, yeah. Easter would be very on theme for Easter though. That was a nice idea on his part, for real.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely open and curious to see where the other stories go. I guess to kind of reassure all of you, we're not going to be reading it back to back. Not now. It won't be for a while when we get to the second story. And the second story I know revolves around Azrael, who is, I'm sorry, Azazel, who was a minor character in this story. And it is about Noah's Ark, the flood, all of that. So it's like millions of years after this story takes place. But uh, so yeah, not right now, but sometime down the line, way, way down the line. And I guess if anyone's curious to read a bit more about this stuff, the author also wrote a very, very short, like 150-page spin-off about Rosier and Asmodeus and their relationship now that they're demons in hell. If that interests anyone, that's out there for you to read. So yeah, that wraps up all the questions and thoughts I have in my notes. Before we move on to our discussion for next month's book, does anyone else have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, characters, plot lines they want to go over, anything?
I'm just kind of curious about like the author and if anybody knows anything about the author and if anybody has any thoughts about like his decision to like be anonymous. It's just something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, I usually try my best to do a lot of research on the author and whatnot, find interview clips and everything. There's next to nothing about this author online. I don't know if you have the physical copy of the book or a PDF or audiobook, whatever, but in my PDF copy, the author has kind of a foreword where he says that his decision to remain anonymous is because he's closeted, and he wouldn't want his, I guess, religious family to know what he's writing. Um, So yeah, I don't really have much else to answer your question, but that's a little tidbit, I guess.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay.
Just
Oh,
this
go
one
ahead.
thing. Did anyone? Oh, sorry. Did anyone also notice the kind of like feminine that Lucifer took on the traditionally feminine, I don't know, descriptions of relationship, usually with the hand on the waist, and Michael was the masculine, or like pretty much the embodiment of the masculinity in the relationship. I thought that was like really kind of interesting.
Yes, I did notice that. I did think it was interesting as well. Um, I guess on one hand, Michael being the more traditionally masculine figure in the relationship is because he's the angel of strength. So I guess that plays a part in that. And then Lucifer being the angel of beauty plays a part in him being a bit more feminine. Also, now that I'm thinking about your question, Arian, the depiction of Lucifer in this story reminds me a lot of Aphrodite from Greek mythology, that like hyper feminine beauty and allure that she has. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it makes the most sense for the dynamic in the story, but I don't know. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
It's kind of interesting to think about the different depictions of strength, how Michael can be sort of a characterization of this brute physical strength, but um, Lucifer can be this almost more like influential type of strength.
For some reason, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm reminded of what I forgot to mention earlier when we talked about sex in the story. I found it kind of interesting that the angels have genitals. I just thought that was kind of odd considering that there's no sex. Everyone in the Bible, I'm sorry, everyone in the story is male. Um, there's no childbirth, any of that. So I just was like, why do they need genitals? Um, Especially because they don't need to eat, so they don't produce waste. So why do they have anuses? But I guess it makes sense for the orgy scene. But yeah, weird thought, but that just came into my mind. Okay, well, I think that's everything. So let's move on to next month's book. I know some folks have shared that this book felt very dense. I agree. So I would like a lighter read for next month. So I went ahead and chose what I think is going to be our first romantic comedy. Um, it is called The Other Man by Farhad Daddy Berjour. I will post the link in the chat so you guys can read the description. Give me just a sec. Okay, I posted it. Go ahead and read that on Goodreads and let me know what you guys think about that book choice.
I think it has potential. It's pretty cute, and it'll be our first rom com. I'm excited.
I think on some level I chose it for you because I know you said you mentioned you love romance so much. So here you go.
Thank you, so touched.
Yeah, so I also like the book.
Me too. I'm excited.
Cool. So, as always, I was thinking last Sunday of the month. That would be January 26th at 12 p.m. PST, and then whatever time that is for you guys. Does that work for everyone, or should I move it to a different day or time?
That would work.
Yes, that works for me too.
Yeah, that should also work for me as well.
Cool. And I guess, Cam, while I have you, where do you live? Like, where are you located?
I'm in Boston.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I'll put us down for the 26th of next month at 12 p.m. PST to discuss The Other Man. So before we go, does anyone else have any last minute questions, comments, thoughts? It could be about this month's book, about next month's book, about the club, anything before I let you guys go?
It's sad that Michael isn't here, but as always, thank you, Jonathan, with an H, for hosting and planning the meeting.
You're very welcome, and thank you all for coming. It means a lot. This club wouldn't be possible without you guys, so thank you so, so much. Okay, well, I hope I can see you all next month. But until then, take care of yourselves. Happy holidays if you guys celebrate. I know it's past the holiday season, but happy holidays if you celebrate. And then, of course, Happy New Year. Um, okay, bye-bye. Have a nice day, you guys.
Bye.
Right back, y'all. See you, y'all.
Bye, everyone.